When I saw the film, I hadn't read the book. I've now, funnily enough, started reading the book because they gave us copies of the book at the at the screening. And as you rightly said in that interview, one of the things that Rowan Joffe does. I mean, Rowan Joffe before this made this very, very unmemorable remake of Brighton Rock, which wasn't a great film by any means. One of the things he does here as writer and director is to take that central diary, which when you read the book, it's like the journal entry, and then you start reading it. It's actually you are reading her journal entry, and turn that into a video diary. And there's some discussion about that being during the kind of creative process. That's the moment that it all suddenly clicks. And you go, yeah, actually, that is a really smart idea because it does indeed ease the transition from the page to the screen. It's obviously apparent that when you're watching a film, because of the way a film plays out, the film isn't going to have perhaps the sort of the rich thematic depth of the novel. And interestingly enough, somebody else in that screening with her, I said, have you read the book? He said, everybody's read the book. So the other problem you're up against is, how are you going to make the film work on the basis that many of the people who are going to go and see the film have read the book? Because apparently in that screening that I was in the minority, not knowing how it all played out. Now, if you know anything about cinema and amnesia cinema, you can do a lot of the legwork anyway. But the question is, will it work if you've read the book?
Is amnesia cinema? That's a thing.
It's an entire genre. There's memory, or the lack of it, is a favourite subject of cinema. I mean, one of the reasons for that may well be film theorists have held for a long time that cinema itself replicates the function of memory. So it's not entirely surprising that, whatever genre you look in, amnesiac narratives are very, very popular with cinema, whether it's Total Recall or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind or Spellbound or Shattered or any of those things. It is a very common thing. In the case of this, you get this sort of simple setup, which is that she can't remember anything from one day to the next. Her whole life has to be explained to her every morning by Colin Firth as Ben, and then she gets this mysterious phone call from Dr. Nash, spelt with a C in the film, with an SH in the novel, as it now turns out, saying, actually, you've been making a video diary. In the book, of course, it's a diary. And I like that setup. The thing with the film is this: it is somewhat flimsy, but it is good fun. And one of the reasons it works is because those three central performances work. I mean, Nicole Kidman is back on form. She reminds us how good she was in things like The Others. She does that kind of paranoid, tremulous thing very well. And it completely expunges the memory of Grace of Monaco, which is very good. Colin Firth does a very good job of playing with our impression of Colin Firth because, for most people, that idea of waking up in bed next to a strange man and it turns out to be Colin Firth,
how crushingly disappointing.
How horrible. But, in this particular case, he does a very good job of, he sort of takes the idea of what the audience may or may not already think about him, and he kind of plays with that because you're seeing it play out from Christine's point of view, from the central character's point of view. However, it's the third part of this, which is Mark Strong playing Dr. Nash, who, when you first hear Dr. Nash, because you hear his voice on the telephone and he sounds as sinister as anything, hello, Christine, I'm Dr. Nash, I'm explaining this to you. So immediately you start, and as you said in that interview, you kind of start to suspect everybody, and then it becomes a sort of cat and mouse thing as who do you trust, who's telling the truth, as the narrative flips, hither and yon. I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't think it has any sort of great depth, and I think it's a film to be enjoyed whilst you're watching it. And whilst I'm reading the book, it's interesting, you kind of see, because I'm only reading the book now, because as I said, they gave out the copy of the book at the screening, and I'm enjoying the book. But it's interesting. You say, oh yeah, well, they've simplified that and they've changed that, but I think they've done quite a good job of compressing it. Certainly from Rowan Joffe's point of view, I think he's done a good job of taking a sort of intricate text and sort of cramming it down into a 90-minute movie. And I think that it also benefits that it's got this kind of slightly dour suburban setting, that the whole film seems to take place in these it's got like a washed grey palette to it. And so because you're watching something that's got a sort of vaguely recognisable setting, I mean, I know what you said then about, if Dr. Nash is trustworthy, how come he keeps meeting her in sinister car parks? But actually that's all part of the film's slightly dour palette, which means that it's that slightly oxymoronic thing that it is lively but dour at the same time. And I enjoyed it. Although if you've seen anything like Shattered, you can kind of tell where the narrative is going, because that's the thing to which this owes the greatest debt. I think it plays its theme out quite well. It was odd that so many people in the screening room that we were in had seen the film, and therefore that kind of raises the issue of, would this work had read the book? Would this work had you already read the book? But I thought, as a piece of flimsy but fun psycho thriller cinema, it kind of did the job. And I think you enjoyed it too. And you had read the book, right?
Yeah, I had read the book. I'd forgotten some of the detail, but I had read the book, so I kind of knew which way it was heading. And I thought it was terrific. And we can't talk about... There is a particular moment which is a gasp-inducing moment, and I think people will remember it particularly for that.
Yes.
There are other critics around who are making great fun of the fact that it's called Before I Go to Sleep, and they say, yes, it's a snooze fest. It's just
I don't get that. I mean, it's a lot of things, but it was never boring.
No.
I mean, it was never. I mean, I do think that is just a classic example of critics, taking a title and going, oh, I can do a clever gag with that.
Yes, and in the vaguest possible way, I would suggest that the movie could have finished 5 minutes earlier. Again, that whole sequence at the end was slightly drawn out, didn't you think, Mark, in a general sense?
It didn't bother me that much because the movie still had a sort of relatively nippy running time. And also, I thought it was it's ludicrous. The plot is ludicrous, although I know it has kind of basis in that, but it is ludicrous. But just because something being ludicrous isn't necessarily a problem. It's okay, this is a far-fetched fanciful. How are you going to make me believe it? And actually, the way the film makes you believe it is, well, we're going to give you 3 actors, all giving top-notch performances, and we're going to set it in an environment that is just real enough to make you think this is kind of credible whilst the movie's playing out.